The violence resulted in over 300 deaths and over 70 billion rand in damage to the economy. Let's unpack this further with journalist Kavil Singh, who co-authored the book 8 Days in July. Kavil, thanks so much for speaking to us this evening, a year after that devastating unrest in July last year. So, Police Minister Cele saying a little bit earlier that 19 people have been arrested, 8 of them by the Hawks, 11 by that specialist detective team. 2 cases, unfortunately, withdrawn, and the other 17 out on bail. And according to Minister Cele, they definitely have a case to answer to. My question to you is, do you think that the police have the right people, that the true masterminds of that violent week last year will be brought to book?
Thank you so much for having me on. I think the answer to that question is absolutely not. When we talk about the masterminds, we're talking about a lot of what we saw on the ground during that period of time. This week I spoke to several community leaders on their thoughts and reflections from a year ago, and everybody really says the same thing. There aren't any sort of prominent names that are coming up when you talk about the unrest and the arrests. Groups of men during that period of time in unmarked vehicles, often heavy-duty vehicles with attached chains to the back of their vans, rip security gates from businesses open, and just simply take what they want and allow people to come in and loot. I personally witnessed these groups of people blocking key link roads with tires in the back of their vans, removing them, dropping them in front of roads, lighting them up, and leaving those areas, and really putting police and authorities in a very difficult position. Now, we haven't really heard too much of detail about this. And we also haven't heard too much about, if you look at former President Jacob Zuma's daughter, she posted a lot of inflammatory, or it would appear to be inflammatory posts. There was one video that she deleted, which had someone shooting at a poster of former President President Cyril Ramaphosa, excuse me. That sort of action from someone that influential, there really should be some kind of consequence. There should be some kind of discussion, some sort of public forum discussion about that. So, big names are not really coming up in this. And 1 year later, we have families who are still reeling from this. If you look at families in Phoenix, families really in all parts of the city, they've lost loved ones, they've lost homes, they've lost income. The degree to which the economy was damaged cannot be understated. If your clip of the Premier speaking earlier on, he says there's a huge recovery, but in his first visit to the Pilani Mall in Umlazi today, there were a lot of complaints from business people saying that they had lost a lot of income. There were millions that they had shortfalls in, which resulted in unemployment for a lot of their employees. A lot of people left without jobs, had to move on. So I think it would be very difficult for us to say that justice has been served and the correct people have been brought to book. I think intelligence is definitely something that's lacking. I think our police service has a shortfall of informants, and that's a well-documented fact, and that's really a very important part of investigations for things like this.
So obviously investigations, arrests and prosecutions are what we ultimately want. But the starting point is having those conversations where those high-profile names are used, where we're saying outright who should be prosecuted for inciting this violence. What do you think it means that those conversations are not happening in public forums?
You have to look at the ANC when it comes to this. The beginning of the unrest really formed when the factional fighting of the ANC spilled out into the streets of South Africa, into the streets of Durban, the streets of Johannesburg, KwaZulu-Natal. And if we don't really, if we properly look at this, that factionalism has eroded itself even into spheres of government. So even if you look at the state of the police, both in terms of culture and resources, it's just not up to scratch. So for law enforcement agencies to make the necessary arrests, the proper investigations, one also has to wonder if factionalism plays a role in that. I mean, we haven't had a national police commissioner that's managed to complete their term of office. I mean, that's something that's very telling.
Kavil, you went through hundreds of pages of leaked documents in order to write that book, 8 Days in July. What did those documents tell you about how easy it was for the masterminds and the instigators of this violence, not only to put in place the sort of events that sparked bigger incidents of looting, but also to get away with it?
I mean, once again, you know, the factional fighting, the ANC structures that were in place were a big part of why there was such a large amount of coordination for this. I mean, people were coordinated better than the police. They were coordinated better than private security. Everyone, all of those sort of services were really playing catch up to what appeared to be an extremely well-coordinated plan. And we also have to look at the culture of KZN, the political violence. I mean, even if you look at this year, there have been several councillors, public officials that have been just blatantly shot and killed in several incidents. And we've had the Morane Commission in KwaZulu-Natal. We know what these issues are. And really, according to that commission, the report, the heart of it, even the Human Rights Commission said this in their investigation of the unrest, is factional fighting within the ruling party. When you have also cadre deployment, you know, there's a culture of this person is someone that I have to be beholden to. And you find that state sort of resources and state entities become eroded because of that with politics instead of really following their core mandate.
Let's look at the likelihood of this happening. A lot of people are saying all the right ingredients are at play for the powder keg to explode once more. There's increased cost of living, there's increased unhappiness, there are large-scale wage disputes, there's blocking of national roadways. All of these things formed part of the lead-up to the July unrest last year. What are we looking at currently, not to be negative or pessimistic or to bring about a self-fulfilling prophecy, but to be very realistic about the circumstances we find ourselves in?
Sure. I mean, I think you're being very pragmatic with that sort of outlook. I mean, if you look at KwaZulu-Natal just this week, there have been trucks blocking roads, protesting against the fuel hike. There have been protests this morning in Ladysmith, and those were all sort of those are issues that haven't really gone away. I mean, KwaZulu-Natal has 11.5 million people and just 18,000 police officers. Obviously, that's augmented with private security and sort of city police. But I mean, the fact remains that poverty is a massive role player in this. People have been unemployed for an extremely long time. In KwaZulu-Natal, I mean, today we went around to different malls, but there are a massive amount of businesses that are still completely shut down. People are still completely unemployed. And that's playing a massive role in also the mindset of people in KwaZulu-Natal. When people are seeing trucks blocking roads, there's messages flying everywhere. There's a second unrest. There's a collective trauma that's in the minds and the hearts of South Africans, particularly in Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal. And it's definitely not, I mean, if you look at the flooding as well, there was a very slow response to that in Durban. And I think over the last year, people haven't seen much of a difference in leadership. People haven't seen our leaders really galvanizing with the energy that they expect. And that sort of lack of action, poverty, the depression of unemployment, it puts people in a very difficult position.
Kavil, one last quick question. We are running out of time, and I want to get to this point. So we've got the circumstances there waiting for the flame. Hopefully we're not seeing the same kind of instigation that we saw last year, or is it just a case of the public perhaps not knowing about it?
I mean, we didn't really know about it the first time around. You know, it really took everybody by surprise. I mean, it even took the police by surprise. I think that the scale of which the July 2021 unrest got out of control, perhaps even the people instigating it didn't expect that to happen. But I think it's also important to note that with the exception of the horrid violence that played out in Phoenix, a lot of communities did come together and did sort of show that they wouldn't allow this to happen. They wouldn't allow these instigators into their communities. They wouldn't allow the country to be completely taken away. And maybe that's one positive thing that we can look at, that the attitude of South Africans did persevere during that period of time. But yes, the fears are still there, and it's definitely something that we need to properly address. I mean, the fact that we're only really discussing arrests 1 year later is it's unacceptable.
Well, perhaps hopefully that preparedness is going to stand us in good stead should anything similar start brewing.